Once upon a time, deep in the cold forests of old Europe, a young girl with skin as white as snow bit into a poisoned apple and fell into a death-like sleep. You know this story. We all do. But what if I told you that wasn't the only Snow White? What if there was another tale? One just as strange, just as magical, but buried under the weight of its more famous counterpart. A story of two sisters, a vengeful dwarf, and a prince cursed to roam the wild as a bear. This is the tale of Snow White and Rose Red, a forgotten fairy tale with a history just as dark as its more famous sibling. Before we dive into the story itself, let's start with its origins. Snow White and Rose Red is a German fairy tale collected by the brothers Grimm in their second edition of Children's and Household Tales in 1815. But unlike Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which originated from various folk tales with possible roots in real historical figures, Snow White and Rose Red appears to be more of a literary creation, rather than an ancient legend passed down through generations. Unlike the other Snow White, who was an only child hunted by a jealous queen, this Snow White, who might I say is also an entirely different Snow White, has a sister, Rose Red. They are inseparable, two sides of the same coin, representing different yet complementary aspects of nature. Snow White is calm and gentle, while Rose Red is bold and full of life. Their story isn't about royal intrigue or poisoned apples, but about an enchanted bear, a malevolent dwarf, and the strange forces that weave fate together. But before we get ahead of ourselves, why the name Snow White at all? Why are there two vastly different tales with the same name? Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs first appeared in the Grimm's 1812 edition of Children's and Household Tales, based on much older folklore. It follows a young princess, a magic mirror, and a deadly rivalry. But Snow White and Rose Red? This one's entirely different. No wicked stepmothers, no poisoned apples, no seven dwarfs in a cozy little cottage, though there is one very angry dwarf who plays an entirely different role. These two Snow Whites share little beyond their name and their fair complexions. Some scholars believe the Grimms simply reused the name Snow White because it fit the theme of purity and innocence. Others think there may have been some earlier, lost versions of this tale that linked the two together more closely. Either way, this Snow White story is about something different: sisterhood, transformation, and the strange, often hidden connections between man and beast. And that brings us to the story itself. Once upon a time, in a small cottage at the edge of a great forest, lived two sisters and their mother, a poor but kind widow. Snow White and Rose Red were as different as day and night. Snow White, quiet and gentle. Rose Red, wild and adventurous. Yet they loved each other fiercely and did everything together. They roamed the forests, befriended the animals, and brought joy wherever they went. One winter night, there's a knock at the door. The girls open it to find a great black bear standing outside. Instead of attacking, he speaks, his voice deep and sorrowful. He asks for shelter from the cold. Their mother, kind-hearted and without fear, welcomes him in. Over time, the bear becomes their friend, visiting each night and sleeping by the fire. Snow White rests her head against his thick fur, while Rose Red plays with him like a great dog. But then spring comes, and the bear tells them he must leave. There is something he must do. The sisters don't understand but let him go, saddened by his departure. Not long after, they meet a strange little man in the forest, a dwarf with a long, tangled beard. They save him multiple times from unfortunate situations, yet every time, instead of gratitude, he curses them, berates them, and scurries away. But the real twist comes when they stumble upon him one last time, just as the great black bear returns. Before their eyes, the bear attacks the dwarf. The sisters are horrified until they realize what's happening. With one final strike, the bear kills the dwarf, and in that moment, the curse breaks. The bear is no bear at all, but a prince. He had been enchanted by the wicked dwarf, doomed to roam the land in beast form until the dwarf met his end. Snow White and Rose Red are shocked, but overjoyed. The prince reveals his true self, and in time, he and Snow White fall in love. Rose Red too finds happiness with the prince's brother, and the tale ends with the sisters finding their own, happily ever after. Unlike Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which centers around themes of vanity, deception, and resurrection, Snow White and Rose Red is a story of kindness, fate, and transformation. It lacks the dark betrayals and murderous queens, but carries its own sense of magic and mystery. It also explores the duality of nature, Snow White and Rose Red, two sides of the same coin, the bear and the prince, two versions of the same soul. It's a tale of trust, of knowing that the unknown isn't always dangerous, and that sometimes salvation comes in the form of something wild. Yet, despite its enchanting story, this version of Snow White has faded into obscurity, overshadowed by the more dramatic, sinister tale of poisoned apples and vengeful stepmothers. But perhaps it's time to bring it back to the light. Fairy tales are not just bedtime stories. They are echoes of older beliefs, hidden truths, and forgotten fears. And if this tale has been forgotten, what other strange and lost myths are still waiting to be found? Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching beyond the structure of what you know.